Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Maher, and I'm joined today by Kelly Kirby, and we're going to be talking MLB free agency winners and losers with a focus on fantasy baseball. Now, a ton has already happened in Major League Baseball free agency, but we have a ton still to come, too. There's a lot of big names like Corbin Burns that have yet to sign, but we already have some major moves like Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, Garrett Crochet, and so many more. So we're going to get to as many as we can today and try to group them together and give you an idea of who we think are winners, who are losers, and who are, we'll find out together. Kelly, how are you doing today?
Yes, sir. I'm doing pretty well today. It's snowing like crazy outside, so I'm definitely in the mood to talk baseball.
I'm so jealous since I moved. I love the snow. I'm from the Northeast. I have lived in Georgia the last couple of years, and I miss the snow. And
yes,
now I have a 4-year-old son who he likes baseball, but he also likes the snow. And he's like, "When's it going to snow?" And we're like, "Oh, maybe tomorrow." But like, it's not going to snow. But the opposite of snow, baseball. Let's dive right in. And I wanted to, I tried to group these together in a way that made sense and a way that could be fun to talk about it. The first three I grouped together, a trio of lefty hitters: Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, and Cody Bellinger. Juan Soto famously signed a ginormous contract with the New York Mets that made Joe Pisapia very happy. I watched that video the other day. He was a little too happy for my liking. So I'm going to try and maybe, throw some shade at that a little bit, try and bring him back down a little bit. Kyle Tucker traded to the Cubs, and we're talking winners and losers. The biggest winner would be you as a Cubs fan, someone who loves Kyle Tucker. And then Cody Bellinger traded to the Yankees. The classic Brian Cashman move, who loads up, he likes to load up on lefty pitchers and lefty hitters. That's been his move for 20 years now. It doesn't always work, but it is his go-to move for that stadium. It's very predictable. But it works. It's a short fence in right field. I get why he does it, but it is interesting that he kind of just always goes back to that well every single offseason. So of these three, other than, obviously the obvious winners like you getting Kyle Tucker and Juan Soto getting all that money, who do you think in your mind is the biggest winner from this group with an eye towards fantasy baseball?
I mean, I think you got to go with Bellinger. And the only reason that I think that's true is if he turns back into Cody Bellinger MVP-esque hitter. I mean, he's going to hit 40 home runs. He's going to bunt 40 home runs out of that ballpark. I've said
Correct.
that when I wrote outfielder profiles, I was like, he's either going to hit 40 home runs or he's going to bat like 197. And I don't really think there's a middle. So he can be the biggest winner from a fantasy perspective. I don't know where you draft him based on that profile, but I think he's going to go higher than he otherwise would have. But to honor Joe, I'm going to say that the Mets are the biggest losers, having to pay that much money to Juan Soto. So just for fun. But no, as a Cubs fan, I am ecstatic about Kyle Tucker. My dad is ecstatic about Kyle Tucker, and I'm very sad about losing Bellinger. And I think it's a good move all around. So
yeah, I think I don't care about the Mets and how much money they have to spend. Stephen Cohen has more money than I'll ever imagine in my lifetime. So I don't really feel bad about billionaires spending their millions, even though this one was close to $1 billion. So closer to $1 billion than we've ever seen before. So I don't really, it doesn't bother me too much. It's not my money. I used to, as like a younger fan, I would be like, oh, that's way too much money. But now, especially in baseball where there's no hard cap, I'm like, it's not my money. These guys are billionaires. Just spend it. Don't be cheap. If anyone is worth it, I would say it's Ohtani, but also, Soto's pretty good too. I do think you could make the argument that Juan Soto could be a loser here. Not that he's going to be like a major loser. You need to like drop him in your rankings. You need to be worried about drafting him. I just think, like we just talked about with Yankee Stadium, he hit 40 home runs last year, and he was going to hit 40 home runs every year, even though like, he does different things with his power. He's not always necessarily a pure power hitter. He's just a perfect like all around hitter. But you can, trip into 40 home runs in Yankee Stadium. And he had Aaron Judge batting, in that lineup to protect him. The Mets lineup as it currently stands, and they, I assume they're going to do more this offseason to address it, but not a lot of protection. It seems like the early word is probably Lindor is going to bat leadoff, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that seems to be the way they're going to go. Have him bat second. Then currently the projection is Mark Vientos batting third. And I really like Mark Vientos, but I don't know that you necessarily want to go into a season with him as your locked in 3-hitter protecting Juan Soto. And then after that, there's not a whole lot of protection in that lineup. Like Brandon Nimmo, okay. Starling Marte, Jeff McNeil, like these are guys. And, you know, it's a worse ballpark. It's not a terrible ballpark, but it's a worse ballpark, worse lineup. I think he would have been better off, you know, as a Red Sox fan. I'm happy he left the Yankees. I did not want, you know, to look at Juan Soto on the Yankees for the next 15 years. But, you know, I think, and it's like hard to call him really like a loser because, like I said, there's not going to be any downgrade. He's probably going to hit a fewer home runs. So be it. He's still going to be one of the best hitters in baseball. But it is interesting, you know, just projecting out from a power standpoint, you know, we'll see. And I also, you know, this is more pure baseball than fantasy, but, you know, to talk about, you know, the show that Joe and Welsh did last week after the signing, which I recommend going and checking out. Joe was ecstatic, and he saw this as a turning point for the Mets. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. Like, he's obviously a huge cornerstone piece, but we've seen the Mets throw a ton of money around before, and it didn't work out. And like I said, there's not a lot of protection in that lineup. The starting rotation is very shaky. You know, they're turning Clay Holmes into a starter. We'll see if that works. They just, you know, they brought in another depth piece in Griffin Canning. They don't have, you know, a top end trio of starters that I would want to go into the postseason with. And so I think they still have a lot of work to do. And granted, now they can build around Juan Soto, but I don't think it's necessarily the turning point immediately that you know, Joe thinks it is. But it could be if the rest of the season goes the way they're hoping. Anything else there? What do you think about Kyle Tucker with the Cubs as a Cubs fan?
I think, I mean, for me, it's kind of are they going to try to sign him for a long deal? Because I think he's a free agent after this year, right? And so those are my favorite players to draft in fantasy. I mean, I think he's going to have a monster season. And so I feel like it's a great signal from them that they're maybe going to attempt to try to field a team that could make the expanded playoffs. And I will call them the expanded playoffs forever. But in terms of fantasy, I'm like, right, they don't have a terrible lineup around him, but you don't really need one, I think, for him to kind of do what he does and get on base, and you're going to get a ton of runs out of him. He'll probably hit 25-ish to 30 home runs. For Tucker, the benefit is versus Soto, I think, is like the stolen bases that you can get from him if he's healthy. And that's the kicker from last year, right? That everyone who drafted him didn't know if he was ever going to play again, and the Astros told you nothing. So I'm assuming his physical was good and that we didn't just throw, you know, but I also don't think we traded a ton to get him. So there's that. But no, given the two, I'm not actually sure which one I would want more with the lineup around them, unless they were to bat Soto ahead of Lindor. Because otherwise it's like you said, it's kind of this really top two. And then what does Vientos do? So I think I'd rather have Tucker.
Yeah. And I do want to be clear. I do really like Mark Vientos, and I think he's going to be good. Yeah. I think he broke out last year. I picked him up like for free on waivers, and just like, he just never left my lineup the rest of the season. Like he does seem like a really good young hitter. I just meant more, it is risky. Like, if you want to be a World Series team going into the season with Mark Vientos as your locked in 3-hitter, like there could be young hitter growing pains, especially as the league adjusts to him. So, and like I said, you know, you agreed with, that's not a ton of protection. But I'm sure they're going to do more. There's still a possibility that Pete Alonso comes back. I think it's unlikely now, but it's possible. They're going to do something. Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, they're going to add another piece to that lineup. And if you want to stay on top of all of the baseball offseason news, check out the FantasyPros News Rankings and Scores app. Stay ahead with FantasyPros News Ranking and Scores for breaking MLB free agency news and instant fantasy analysis on each signing. You can download it today on iOS and Android and never miss a move, and you'll get analysis from people like me and Kelly, who write a lot of the news and help manage the news desk. And we're usually pretty on top of getting news out there pretty quick. We add fantasy analysis. And you can also sign up to get push notifications for, you know, things that we push as breaking news So you don't have to scroll around for it. You can just find out, seconds after Corbin Burnes signs with the Red Sox, you'll get that push notification right on your phone. And so now let's talk about a few more lefties. We talked about some lefty hitters. Let's talk about some lefty pitchers. And the big lefties that have signed and or been traded so far, Blake Snell, Max Freid, and Garrett Crochet. And you can, cue the video from Breaking Bad. The Dodgers just can't keep getting away with this, with signing another big free agent, putting deferred money in there, just getting, they just won a World Series with one of the best rosters ever. And it looks like they're just going to get better. And the other thing about it is when you kind of look at what they did, and again, like this is more like, pure baseball, a billionaire spending their millions, but they threw a lot of money at Blake Snell. But then you look at what Max Freid got from the Yankees, and all of a sudden you're like,
yep,
that Blake Snell contract doesn't look so bad anymore. And I think the Max Freid contract is a bad one. I get why the Yankees did it. I get why they like their lefties. I get that they needed the pitching, and they wanted to make sure that they got someone. But 8 years, $218 million for Max Freid. That's more than some people thought Corbin Burnes might get. And so now I think one of the reasons we haven't seen Corbin Burnes sign yet is because I think Max Freid broke the market, because he got so much more than people were anticipating. They're like, well, now Corbin Burnes needs 250 over 7 or something like that. And so now the fact that the Dodgers went out and got Blake Snell for $5,182, not so bad. Especially, it's obviously it's like a higher AAV, shorter commitment, but 8,218 for Max Freid is tough. And then the Red Sox went out, and there were a lot of crazy packages being thrown around for Garrett Crochet. There were like, these top 3 prospects for the Mets aren't, they're not enough for like what the White Sox want. And it just seemed like there was a lot of smoke about what the White Sox wanted for Garrett Crochet. And it seems like maybe that was all coming from the White Sox, because the prospect package they got for Garrett Crochet was fine. It's like, as a Red Sox fan who's, pretty in touch with the Red Sox farm system, like it didn't sting when I saw the return. I was like, okay, Kyle Teal, like he's a good young catcher. I like that. But if I have to trade any position for the future, I'll trade a catcher. Like, no problem. Braden Montgomery, last year's first round pick. Very excited about him, but he's probably 4 years away from contributing at best. And then, another, 2 more higher end prospects, but not anyone from the top tier. And so to get Garrett Crochet, a little bit of control, bona fide ace for that rotation, I'll do that deal any day. So the Dodgers win again. They get a pretty good contract, another good pitcher. They needed pitching. It seems like they have a ton of pitching, but it's always kind of like hurt. And so they just, it's crazy how much pitching they had last year. And then by the end of the year, they were just on fumes. They had nothing left, and they still won the World Series with like their 9th pitcher and, their 9th starter. The thing with these pitchers is trying to pick winners and losers. Garrett Crochet, I think, is a pretty clear winner. We can talk about him a little bit, but I think we would both agree that going from the White Sox to the Red Sox, the joke of changing his socks, I think he's a pretty big winner. Yes, he has to pitch in Fenway Park, but that's not the worst ballpark for pitchers. It's hitter friendly, but it also it takes away a lot of home runs as much as it gives like doubles and other things. Max Freid is. I would also think Blake Snell is probably a winner just going to the Dodgers. Max Freid's an interesting one. Going from the Braves to the Yankees, again in that stadium, smaller stadium, but he's a lefty. That's kind of, like we talked about already, like the Brian Cashman move is like lefties to kind of protect against that right field porch. So what's your take on these 3 guys? Specifically, let's start with Max Freid and how you think, like how does this impact like how you're feeling about Freid going into the season as a fantasy manager now that he's on the Yankees?
So the different, I've a pretty well known not Blake Snell truther with regard to what you're getting when you draft him, and what you're getting.
It's a very eloquent way to put it.
You're getting you like in a 5x5 league, you are risking your whip every single time he steps on the mound, and because it could be a game where he strikes out 12 and walks 3 or whatever, and then or it could be a game where he strikes out 7 and walks 7, and you're just sort of hit and miss. Whereas with Freid, I've always liked his just kind of he's very consistent. He's like kind of more of a ratio protector than he is a strikeout guy, obviously. So I thought the contract was bananas, but I don't mind the sense that he can really, in fantasy, he does have a lot of value still, in my opinion. So there's that. Crochet, I think, is the big one, obviously. Getting off of the White Sox, like, even if he went to play with the Savannah Bananas, like, that still would be an upgrade for him. So I love that move. I think he's going to be great there. I think he's going to
be an upgrade for everybody, personally.
That is true. I just think he's going to have a lot of success. And how high would you draft him? Like, would you draft him above Snell?
Let's take a look. Let's see where I have him right now. I would say off the just like you said, like, I'm not a Blake Snell truther either. I have concerns about him. You know, he really struggled at the beginning of last year. I think the general consensus is that we chalk that up to how late he signed and just kind of how weird it was getting up and running. But he does scare me. And as of right now, yes, I have Garrett Crochet as my SP6. And so I would definitely I would take him first of the three. I have Crochet 6th. I have Snell 12. And I have Max Freid at 35. Maybe that's too low. Now that he's on the Yankees, I probably need to bump him up a little bit. But there's some concern for me there too. But yeah, Garrett Crochet, given what he did last year as his first year as a starter, first year as a healthy starter, the ceiling has a roof, as Michael Jordan likes to say. And I also do think an underrated thing we talked a little bit about last year is he's a big fastball guy. The Red Sox, with all of their young pitchers and their new pitching program, they moved a lot of their pitchers away from fastballs into more breaking and off-speed stuff. Too much success. A lot of their young pitchers had career years. And I think there's another layer to be unlocked there for Crochet, where he doesn't necessarily need to be so fastball dependent, and he could lean on more of those secondary pitches. He could potentially be even better, and while also maybe staying healthier. So yeah, I think if I had to rank these. I just told you my rankings, but I also think that's kind of how I would go with the winners and losers. I don't know that any of them are necessarily a loser. I think all three are landing in fine spots. If anything, Freid kind of breaks even a little bit. I think maybe it was a better situation with the Braves, but also it's not the worst situation with the Yankees. And I know they're going to build around him. And so yeah, I think Snell worries me the most of the three. I think the other thing about Freid is, like, for that ballpark, his big thing is limiting hard contact and home runs, which is another reason he was probably attractive to the Yankees and why they gave him that ridiculous contract that I wouldn't have given him. But yeah, I'm high on all three going into the year, even though all three scared me for different reasons, whether it's Crochet, health, Blake Snell, everything, and Freid, just a little bit of everything, and not as much strikeout potential with Freid is the other reason he was probably a little bit lower in my rankings, because with Crochet and Snell, you're going to get a lot of strikeouts. Now let's jump back over to a couple of position players, and this is maybe talking about tiers of free agency. This is probably a next tier down. Not that these are bad players, but we're talking about Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker. That's a top tier. I feel bad grouping Cody Bellinger with those two, but he's a former MVP, so we'll go with it. And then three top of the rotation starters. But now we have Willy Adames and Andres Gimenez. Willy Adames signs with the Giants, and Andres Gimenez was traded to the Blue Jays. And so my first question for you, just looking at kind of like lineup and ballpark, maybe there's a downgrade there. Is Willy Adames a loser? His mother says no, but what do you say?
I don't understand. Like, I go back and forth on him because his stats always surprise me. Right? Like, I can go most of the year not thinking about Willy Adames for any reason whatsoever. And he played in the Cubs division, and I still was just like, eh. But then you look at his numbers. I mean, again, it was a contract year, so I always just grade on a curve where he hit 32 homers and stole 21 bases, and he had 112 RBIs. And I'm like, basically, when? did he get that? Like, how did he get those things? But moving ballparks, it's like it is a question because San Francisco is such a more of a cavern than whatever they call. I still call it Miller Park. But also just I'm concerned that he's going to kind of revert back to what he was in 2023, when he had 24 home runs and only stole 5 bases. And it's kind of, but his batting average was pretty much in line with where it is. Like, he's just a confusing guy. And I really just don't spend a lot of time thinking about him until I'm on a podcast. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, Adames, he's good. But not a person that I'm like targeting in drafts.
Yeah, I've had a similar kind of trajectory with him just because I've been following him, like, following baseball, following him his whole career. And I just remember like when he was just a guy and I was like, I don't need to worry about Willy Adames. And then like, it was like every year he just got a little bit better. And I was like, is this guy good? Like, I can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the first things I did, and that's why I put it in the sheet and I want to talk about it. When I saw he signed there, I was like, that could be good or bad. It's traditionally not a great hitter's park, unless you're Barry Bonds for different reasons. But I wanted to look at like the park factors for right-handed hitters specifically, and I expected to see Miller Park, which is apparently now American Family Field. Remember it. To be significantly better than Oracle Park, which is apparently where the Giants play. But they're both bad for right-handed hitters. I was surprised by that. I guess at least both bad, like overall. Like they're both like bottom tier. Like Oracle Park is actually slightly better at 25, and American Family Field is 2 spots lower at 27. The difference is when you filter by home runs, and that's where the Brewers ballpark goes up to 7 for right-handed hitters, and Oracle Park is 28. So that's the difference. Is I guess just the overall batting, park factor. If you're a right-handed hitter, they're both not overly great, but home runs, and that's kind of like what has kind of been key to his success and interest is those home runs. And I think that's where we could see a decrease depending on how the season goes, because last season he hit 32 of them, career high 32 home runs. He's currently projected with some, these are early projections. Obviously, we're talking about this in December. He's currently projected to hit 25, which is in line with what he hit the year before, 24. But with some, and those are considering park factors too, and also down to 80 RBI. And so I do think this could be a downgrade to him. And again, we're early in free agency. There's still a ton that's going to happen here, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the Giants lineup. But I do think overall it's a slight downgrade. And this is a guy who he just had a career year, 32 home runs, 251 batting average. The year before he batted 217, and the year before that he had 31 home runs, batted 238. And he's a career 248 hitter, which is in line with what he just did. But we have seen decreases in some of these numbers, in the past, and dips. And I just wonder, did we just, like you said, like I'm sure people targeted Willy Adames in fantasy last year because he was in a contract year, and good for him. He had a career year. But now it feels like the Giants are buying high, and fantasy managers, there are some concerns. I don't think he's going to be a terrible pick for you. Like, I don't think he's going to bomb there. But I think if you're just kind of looking at the trajectory, because a lot of times what we like to do with younger players is project and extrapolate. Like, okay, this guy just hit 32 home runs as a 28-year-old. He should only get better. I think we just saw his ceiling personally, and I don't know that he's going to get that ceiling again as long as he's in Oracle Park and in the National League West. Any other thoughts on Willy Adames before we jump over to Gimenez?
I was just going to look real quick. Where is he going? So he's going in the 6th round in the early NFBC drafts. And I think that's just way too high, in my opinion.
I think that's fine.
But shortstop is.
I think it's fine.
Shortstop is. And yeah, again, he just doesn't. He doesn't excite me in any way. So I don't know. I'm like, I would rather draft one of the earlier ones and then hang out after that and do something else. But that's just me. So I don't know. I don't think he's a loser or a winner. I think it was kind of a very neutral shift because we don't know what we're going to get from him year in and year out.
Yeah, I think it's fairly neutral. I think if I had to pick winner or loser, I would pick loser, just because I think there's going to be fewer opportunities for home runs. And of course he's going to, go out and hit 50 home runs last year, and I'm going to look dumb, but I do think it's going to be harder to crack that 30 home run.
You also take every chance you can to call people losers. So, I mean, I'm not gonna bank on that, but yeah, I hope he hits 50 just so that we can look at ourselves and be like, well, good job, guys. Way to undermine him. But
yeah, hopefully someone remembers this December episode and clips it when he hits 50 home runs and throws it in my face. Another player, yes. Different, very incredibly interesting to me for many different reasons, is Andres Gimenez. And my question for him is he a loser or a winner? Is I can't tell if Andres Gimenez is good. Like, is he good? Because his numbers are always like good, and he's always useful for fantasy. And then I look at the expected numbers and his batted ball data, and it's just atrocious. And I've been struggling with this with Andres Gimenez for years. He's someone I've traded for in dynasty leagues. He's someone I traded away in dynasty leagues because I look at his batted ball data and I'm like, this is just gross. It was kind of the same struggle I went through with another player we talked a lot about at the end of last season, and Victor Robles, he was always like this exciting player, and his batted ball data was just really bad, and then it caught up to him. It hasn't really caught up to Andres Gimenez. He's always just fine. Like, granted, he only hit 9 home runs last season, which is kind of what you're going to get when you look at a Statcast page filled with blue. But he still hit 250 and stole 30 bases. And so he's going to be someone who's not going to kill your batting average. He's a guy who has hit 297 before. I don't think we're going to see that again, just based on the batted ball data that we're talking about. The same thing with the 17 home runs. Not really sure how that happened. Maybe just some of those bouncy balls were bouncing the right way for him when the ball's reduced. And it's an interesting move for the Blue Jays. Sometimes I wonder if it's kind of like Bo Bichette insurance for them, because who knows what we're going to get from Bo Bichette this season, and who knows what it's going to look like going forward. And so maybe for them, it just seemed like they're getting a positive replacement level player at an affordable contract. The Blue Jays need to do something. For me, he just seems like a guy, if I'm drafting him, I'm hoping for 10 home runs. I'm basically projecting 30 stolen bases, and a batting average that isn't going to kill me. And that's basically what we're talking about here. I don't know that the change in ballpark or team or roster really does a whole lot for him. I just think he is who he is. I don't think protection matters. I don't think lineup matters. I don't think ballpark necessarily matters. But I just can't tell if this guy's good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he is he's not replacement level, but he's kind of that he's like fantasy replacement level player. Like, I feel like you can draft him, but you could probably also find someone else that you can draft that would do what he does. The 30 home run or the 30 stolen bases, that's why you pick him up. That's why, that's what you're looking for. Because even just I'm looking at his stats going, don't draft 2022 version of him, because like his 371 on base percentage is never coming back. That's just not, it's not going to be a thing. And his ISO, I left in my head, it was 0.087. So, I mean, I don't know how he hits 10 home runs really, but I feel like he would be what I would consider to be just a fantasy replacement level player. Like, I'm like, yeah, you can draft him, just don't draft him high. Right now he's going somewhere in the 15th, 16th round. It's like, I would rather take a shot on upside than draft Andres Gimenez. So that is however you want to look at it.
Yeah, and I do think that's a good clarification that I use the term replacement level, which I kind of hate, because I hate WAR as a metric. We can go, that could be another show someday where my war on WAR and how much I hate it. But I do think it's important that I agree he's like a fantasy replacement level type player because of the stolen bases, and he's just kind of like average across the board everywhere else. As a regular baseball player, he's very good and very valuable to a team. He's got position versatility. He's an elite defender. And that stuff matters more than it does for us as fantasy managers. And he's still very young too. Like, I don't know how much the batted ball stuff is going to really improve at this point, but he's still 25 years old, turning 26. Let's see. He already is 26 now. So he's going to be going into his 26-year-old season. Like, that's still super young. Some guys don't even, are in like their second or third season as a 26-year-old. He's already been in the league for 5 years. And so I think he can get better. He's kind of like the opposite of Willy Adames. I don't know that, you can project Willy Adames to get much better. I think he can get better, but I also think the batted ball stuff is what it is. I don't think he's just going to turn into a power hitter. And I think 10 home runs is the ceiling. Although they are projecting him for 13, but I don't necessarily see that.
Right.
You know what is good is Betting Pros Premium, and right now you can get 1 month of Betting Pros Premium for free. We've got a special offer for you all. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today and use promo code FPFREE. That's FPFREE, FPFREE, spelled it correctly. Baseball might be done for now, but there's a ton of football, basketball, and hockey to bet on, and baseball will be back before you know it. So get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. And don't miss out. Try it for free for 1 month now, available on iOS and Android. And I know you and I have talked a bunch recently. I'm obsessed with the betting systems on the Betting Pros app right now. I just can't help myself. I'm a hardcore like baseball football guy, but I've been diving in creating betting systems to tell me how to bet basketball, and it's like turned me into a profitable basketball bettor, which is very exciting for me. And I'm just like super nerd. I think I'm following like 50 systems, and I've created 60. So I'm at like 110 systems, and every morning I just check my phone. And it's like, you have like 400 systems picks to like sort through today. I'm like, all right, let's go bet 200 picks and turn into a profitable bettor. And it saved me from myself because I use the systems to bet instead of betting from my my heart and my head, which has not been a profitable strategy for me in the past. But I highly recommend it. Despite being an employee, I'm an obsessed user of the app, so I highly recommend going and getting that app and the free premium for a month. And that promo has been available for a while. And so I think if you are interested, you should do it sooner rather than later, because I think it's going to go away pretty soon, because it was kind of a push for the end of the year, kind of get people excited about see what we have to offer. But it already has been live for a while, so I don't think it's going to last much longer. So if you're interested, hop in there now. And speaking of being interested, the A's are interested in spending money again all of a sudden, which is shocking. But it seems like maybe they kind of had to, because there's a potential grievance coming their way if they don't spend some money. And they're moving to a new place. They're going to have to attract some new fans, although they won't be there for a few years. And so they signed Luis Severino, and they traded for Jeffrey Springs. Two very intriguing moves for different reasons, I think. The first thing I kind of looked at was, and I know you and I talked about it like a few weeks ago, I was like, what does this ballpark look like? Because they're going to play in a they're not going to be their ballpark in Vegas isn't going to be ready for years, and so they're going to play at a ballpark in Sacramento. And at first I was like, that could be terrifying. We saw what this did when the Blue Jays did that, at their AA ballpark down in Dunedin, and it was very hitter friendly. It sounds like this ballpark is surprisingly similar to their current ballpark, and so it might be more pitcher friendly than we were thinking. I sent you like the overlay, and it seems like the dimensions are pretty similar to the current ballpark, except that it doesn't have that massive foul ball, foul territory that the Oakland Coliseum has. So I'm not as terrified as I was before. I'm still iffy on both these guys for different reasons. But Luis Severino had a pretty good year last year, and parlayed it into a pretty good contract. And we've seen him be very good in the past. He's someone who was very good on the Yankees. And so my initial question for you before we get into winner and loser is Luis Severino back? Is he back?
Is he back? I don't know. And the idea that this is the biggest contract the A's have handed out like ever is something that I'm not going to be quite over anytime soon. But I mean, yeah, I think it's like a mental trick where, for me, whenever you say a minor league ballpark, I just assume it's going to like be a bandbox that you can just hit like crazy. And so I was surprised when we looked up the how we think it's going to play, in which case I do like him a little bit better. I don't hate the A's overall either, so I'm intrigued by what he could do out there if it really does play the way that they say it's going to. I don't know if I'm intrigued enough to draft him. I would like to see what Sacramento's going to do first before I take a risk. But I think like as like a starting pitcher, 4 on your team, like I think you could do a lot worse based on his kind of career numbers. And So it's all right. I mean, I just don't think his career ERA is 3.81. So I mean, you really have to draft him exactly where you think he's going to play on your lineup, and not expect some massive turnaround from him that all of a sudden he's going to start striking out tons of players again, because he's struck out 7.96 K9 for the last 2 years, literally the same exact number. So it's one of those. Yeah, if you can get him really late, really cheap in drafts, then I feel like you could do way worse. But there's nothing exciting about him.
Yeah, I would agree. It is funny that you said I didn't notice the 7.96 was exactly the same. Surprisingly, the K percentage is up almost 3 points, or I guess almost exactly 2 points. Yeah, that was my one concern, was that we saw when he was with the Yankees and he kind of like had his breakout, he was striking out over 200 batters a year. I don't think those days are coming back. But he seems like he could be cromulent, in that replacement level tier, if we're talking about that for fantasy purposes. His ERA last year, 3.91. Expected numbers are all about like 4.1, 4.2, except for his xERA, which is right around his actual ERA. Early projections have him right around 4.2, which, again, it's fine. Like, it's not going to kill me. Ideally, if I'm drafting someone with that kind of ERA, I want more strikeouts. But it's not like he strikes out no one. If he gives me 8K per 9 and a 4 ERA, like, fine. Like, I'm not going to love that, but he's not going to kill me either. And if I'm in Roto, it's someone who can, as long as if he can go out there and throw another 180, 200 innings, that could be valuable too, especially if the A's take a step forward and they were, they didn't even try last year and they were better than we thought. And so it's possible they're even better next season, especially if they continue to spend some money. Jeffrey Springs, it's a fascinating one. Obviously, the A's have a long history of developing pitchers. They haven't really done that in a long time. Since the days we remember of the Moneyball era, when we focused on all the hitters, but they really had elite pitching at the same time. And the Rays were kind of the new A's, in that we just know that anyone who goes to the Rays is going to be intriguing because of what they do with their pitchers. And the early question I had was, I see the Rays trade away a pitcher. It's, what do the Rays know that we don't? Like, why are they moving Jeffrey Springs? And I get it. They had rotation depth. They had depth to deal from. He has a real contract. He doesn't have like a very expensive contract, but it's like, they bought out his arbitration year. So he is making real money. He's making like 10 million. I forget the exact number, but it's right around 10 million or something. So he is making real money. And so I'm sure that's part of it. They're playing their own version of Moneyball. And so they got to move someone. They might as well move the guy who just came off a major injury right after they signed him, and they didn't really get much on their return. 2025 his cash is 10.5, so he's making 10.5 million. So if we have to look for something, that's probably why they moved him. They need to move some money around, try to compete in the AL East. The A's have to at least appear that they want to spend money, and I think Springs is a really intriguing pitcher. He's someone who we saw before he got hurt a couple years ago was in the Cy Young conversation, and I don't know if we're going to see that kind of ceiling again, but and they're projecting him for like 150 innings. I think that's probably the max we're going to get for him, but it is good that he came back last year. He made 7 starts. He shook the cobwebs off, and down the stretch he looked pretty good. And I'm very intrigued by him. He did strike out more than 1 per 9 innings, and I think we can see that again. They're projecting him to just under 9, but I think he can beat that projection. So I'm intrigued. I don't know that I can call someone who got traded away from the Rays to the A's a winner. But and especially, and the same thing for Severino, going from the Mets, who just signed Juan Soto, to the A's. I don't know that I can call anyone playing in a AAA ballpark for a little while a winner. But I am intrigued. So what are your thoughts on Jeffrey Springs, now that I've poisoned your thoughts?
That's okay. I don't listen to you anyway. But I have the exact opposite feeling about Jeffrey Springs that I do about Blake Snell, in that I irrationally love him for no apparent reason whatsoever. So chances are good that I will buy right back into him this year, probably draft him a round or 2 before I should. I like his numbers. I think that, like you said, he came back and got rid of some of the post-surgery, how does my arm work now type of cobwebs. But it's the same. Like, I don't know how Sacramento's going to play, but I love like his strikeout numbers and where he's been kind of throughout his career. So, yeah, I guess I'm in on him, probably to my own peril, but he's the anti Blake Snell for me. But it is amazing. Do players know that when the Rays trade you and you're a pitcher, that like everyone in the fantasy community goes, "Oh, there's something wrong with you"? Like, I mean, do they have any idea that that's the signal that something has gone off? Because that's the only thing. I mean, if any other team had traded him, we wouldn't be having this conversation and be like, "Oh yeah, this is great." But because it was Tampa, we're like, "Oh, what should we do with that?" So yeah, I find that really interesting, but I'm gonna draft him, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm in a pretty similar spot myself. I've always liked him. I'm going to try and not overdraft him, but I will have a few shares this year for sure, depending on, unless his stock really jumps, then I probably won't. But if it stays reasonable, I'll have a few. I wanted to close it out with kind of just a pile of these guys. I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time talking about any of them in particular. I didn't think any of them warranted their own kind of section, but I did want to hit as much of the major moves as I could. See who kind of stands out. Nice baseball pun. As interesting for one reason or another. Any biggest winners or biggest losers. So I'll just run through the list real quick, and then we can kind of hit who we want to talk about. I'll try not to butcher this guy's name, but Tomoyuki Sugano signed with the Orioles. He's someone we talked about a little bit already, so we can start with him. Devin Williams gets traded to the Yankees for Nestor Cortez. Two interesting moves right there. Yusei Kikuchi goes to the Angels. Sorry for that, Yusei Kikuchi. I'm sorry that happened to you. Nathan Eovaldi re-signs with the Rangers. Clay Holmes signs with the Mets, but as I mentioned earlier, it seems like they're going to try him out as a starter. So that's kind of like the Michael King experiment. We'll see how that goes. Seth Lugo. Jake Berger traded to the Rangers is intriguing. Anytime you get out of Miami, it's good for you. Shane Bieber re-signs with the Guardians. Tyler O'Neill signs with the Orioles. Jordan Romano signs with the Phillies. Alex Cobb signs with the Tigers. Michael Conforto to the Dodgers. The Dodgers can't keep getting away with this. So a few real quick notes, and then I'll toss it to you because I'm talking a lot. Devin Williams, obvious winner, going to the Yankees. Going to be the closer for the Yankees. Good for you. As long as he's healthy, should once again be one of the best closers in baseball. Should continue to be drafted as such. Jordan Romano to the Phillies is intriguing. He's had some rough injury luck and rough. It seems like he goes out and like he'll allow he'll close like 3 games and then he'll allow like 4 runs and you're like, oh god, what's the injury? I know it's coming. And like the next morning he's going on the IL. That seemed to happen. Like I have like group chats where we talk about closers like way too much, and it's like someone will be like, oh god, Jordan Romano's about to go down again, and the next day he does. But the thing with the Phillies is like depending on what happens the rest of the offseason, like he's currently projected to be their closer. Like he could be the closer of the Phillies. So he's a potential buy low, see what happens. You're not going to have to spend a ton of draft capital on Jordan Romano, but the closer for the Phillies has value. Yusei Kikuchi, don't love him going to the Angels. Don't really love anyone going to the Angels until further notice. Nathan Eovaldi re-signing with the Rangers. Not a whole lot changes there. Jake Berger to the Rangers is intriguing. He got off to like a really slow start last year, but then kind of looked better the second half of the season. Tyler O'Neill to the Orioles. I think it's a downgrade from Fenway Park for him. He mentioned being a little surprised that the Red Sox weren't that interested. It is worth noting the Orioles are moving that left field fence back in a little bit this season, much to the delight of the Ryan Mountcastle stands out there like me. So that is intriguing, but I don't think you can really draft him aggressively based on he got hurt again last year. I think if you're going to have a career year Fenway as a right-handed power hitter who lifts like that, I think Fenway Park is where you're going to do it. He had like a good year, but I don't think you can really project a better year with the Orioles. Clay Holmes is intriguing depending on where his draft price is because he's penciled in to be a starter with the Mets. And Shane Bieber re-signs with the Guardians. Intriguing. I was kind of hoping maybe the Red Sox would take a flyer on him because you're really buying low on someone like Shane Bieber right now, and maybe he turns it around. And now that he's back with the Guardians, he's healthy. And then Michael Conforto, it'll be interesting to see what the Dodgers do with him. He doesn't really have the worst righty-lefty splits, but I would imagine the Dodgers, they love righty-lefty matchups and making their lineups that way. I imagine he's going to be like a platoon player for them. Maybe he plays 70% of the time, which is going to be a good design of the Dodgers, but bad that he's not in your lineup every day. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he plays every day for them. You never know with them. And I think I hit everyone. So over to you. Who stands out to you? Winner, loser, disagree with me, agree with me? What do you got?
I'm just looking at it. I Devin Williams is the obvious winner there, I think, or the Yankees are the obvious winner there. I also like Jake Burger a lot with the Rangers. I think that they've got a good lineup around him, and his RBI numbers should be really solid there. So that's probably the one that I have the biggest swing on, the one that I'm most willing to target. And then Romano, like you said, I mean, Shane Bieber, he's another one that I really used to love and tried to draft as much as possible. So I think, yeah, if he can kind of come back even like 75-80% of what he used to be, that's a solid like SP3 to me. So so I'm definitely intrigued by him. I did laugh when Alex Cobb said that he wasn't sure he was going to get signed like anywhere. Like he didn't. I think he talked about that might hang it up or something, and then all of a sudden the Tigers are like, "Here is a giant contract." He's like, "Oh, okay." He could be good. I mean, I never know what to do with him either. But yeah, and Kikuchi, it's one of those. I have that same feeling exactly, like where I just don't want anyone to play for the Angels until they figure things out. But he, he could be all right out there too. He surprises me, I think, everywhere he goes, and it's kind of that same like fantasy firework where most of the time it's going to look pretty consistent, and one week he will absolutely kill your ratios in a head-to-head matchup. So that's the risk with him, but I'm not anti-drafting him as long as the price is good.
Yeah, Sam, I always kind of find myself very down on him, and then I'm surprised that his numbers look the way they do. And you mentioned Alex Cobb. I barely even touched on him because for like the reasons you mentioned. I have a lot of Alex Cobb fatigue because I've always been intrigued by Alex Cobb and his stuff, and he's just like, even in his like healthy years, quote unquote, he's not healthy, and you just you're going to burn an IL slot with him for half the year, and then what you do get is middling, and so yeah, that's where I'm at on that. But I do want to toss it to the audience. So I should have mentioned this earlier, but in the YouTube comments, let us know who you think is your biggest winner, biggest loser. If you agree with us, disagree with us. Is Willy Adames a loser? Is Andres Gimenez good? Can you make the argument that Juan Soto made a mistake going to the Mets for any other reason other than it made Joe Pisapia happy, which we don't like to see happen? And the other thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is there are still a lot of big names yet to sign. Corbin Burns, Alex Bregman, Pete Alonso, Jack Flaherty, Anthony Santander, Teoscar Hernandez, Sean Manaea, Christian Walker, Gleyber Torres. The list goes on. Those are kind of like my list of the top remaining guys. So I ask, everyone in the audience, listeners, make a prediction for where you think these guys are going to sign. Is Corbin Burns or Alex Bregman going to go to the Red Sox? I've seen a lot of Alex Bregman to the Red Sox talk. I thought for sure he was just going to go back to the Astros, but it looks like they're looking elsewhere. They tried to trade for Nolan Arenado before he said no, thank you. I haven't heard a whole lot about Corbin Burns recently. Like I said before, I think the Max Freid contract kind of broke the market, and so not really sure what's going to happen there. I hope for his sake he signs sooner rather than later and it doesn't turn into like a Blake Snell situation, but I assume there are enough teams out there like desperate for pitching that someone's going to pay up. But I do think the Max Freid contract made things interesting. Pete Alonso, fascinating free agent target for teams. A lot of power. Batting average has been all over the place. What's his market look like? Does he take a team-friendly deal to go back to the Mets because of Juan Soto? Does he go somewhere else that, needs a right-handed power bat? Maybe the Yankees get their revenge and bring him over to the Bronx to get back at the Mets. Jack Flaherty, fascinating return last year. Could be interesting to see what kind of contract he gets. I think teams are a little scared about the health and performance issues stuff. Yeah. Any thoughts on any of these guys? Where you think they're going to go?
Yeah, I was going to say I can see the Cubs signing Bregman after having brought in Tucker because they desperately need a third baseman. And then other than that, yeah, I think Alonso's going to end up in New York, but which side I'm not really sure. So But yeah, when you brought it up, I haven't heard anything about Burns in a really long time, so I assume they're talking to everybody and pointing at Max Fried's contract a lot. So I don't really know who wants to pay out for him, but somebody will give him plenty of years. So it's coming. But those are my thoughts on the free agents who have yet to sign.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Kelly for being here and doing this with me. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts, so drop those YouTube comments and let me know who you think the biggest winners and losers are, and make some predictions for MLB free agency, because I think there's a fascinating list of names still out there, and Corbin Burns being the biggest one, and I'm most interested to see where he goes and what that contract is, because I think Max Fried broke everything, and I think the Dodgers are just dancing a victory dance once again because they signed Blake Snell before the Max Fried contract, and now they don't have to worry about it. But thank you all for stopping by. For Kelly Kirby, I'm Mike Maher, and we'll see you next time.